Joining me now with Locked On Gators is John Garcia, Sports Illustrated's Director of Football Recruiting, Locked On's Recruiting Insider, and portal season is about to be upon us. But before we get into that, I'd like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And John, usually when we do these, I get names from, like the Discord or Twitter. This is a me episode. This is an episode that I want to talk about. I don't care what anybody else thinks about. This is all me. Portal season is upon us. It's right behind you. Portal season soon, December 5th. It's going to be one of the most fun days covering college football. I can't wait for it. But everybody panics because Florida, I think you're going to see 12 to 15 kids hit the portal from Florida. I think you're going to see a lot of kids hit the portal from a lot of places. We've all talked about that. But I think the approach to the portal is, at least conceptually, you lose depth to the portal. You lose kids that aren't bought in. You lose kids that aren't getting playing time and won't get playing time next year. So you're losing depth to the portal. You bring in 2 to 3 starters from the portal, which Florida did this year with Osiris Torrens, Montrell Johnson, Ricky Pearsall, and you gain depth from high school. So you're losing depth to the portal, but then you're like, okay, well, guess what? We have you, but 2 years younger, 3 years younger, and possibly better coming
Right.
in. So conceptually, how wrong is that?
I mean, I think it makes sense, right? It's a very logical type of buildup to quantify the portal by, and I think what should be added with a team like Florida with a first year coaching staff is that it's your guys, right? If you're Billy Napier, these recruits are your recruits. You know, you're no longer dealing with as many inherited roster spots. So naturally, there's always going to be a ton of transition, and yeah, as things shake out late in the season, as we're starting to see now into the off season in the spring, it's your players, the kids you have targeted, the young men you have targeted that are going to get that benefit of the doubt. And it's easy to see, right? It's just a nature. It's the nature, it's the business of college football. So those inherited players naturally are the ones that initially look elsewhere. So it works both ways when transitions go down. So I would expect, like you, double digit portal movers for the Florida Gators. We've seen attempted overhauls at certain positions. And then we've seen young players see the field at different positions, right? I mean, look at ETN there at running back. There was a lot of running backs, before him, and many that are older than him that aren't getting carries, right? Lingard and Naquan, right? And these type of players, those are natural candidates that it's really not hard to build an argument for or against. We've seen young players on the defensive line throughout the secondary for Florida this year. Wide receiver looks totally different than it did a year ago. And they're obviously bringing in a lot of numbers at receiver and in the secondary and the D line all together. So naturally, those are kind of some spots where you can tangibly see XYZs coming in. The numbers don't match at some point. So if we can see it, imagine being in that locker room on that roster. You certainly can see it. But that's just one element of portaling, right? And I think that's the beauty of it, right? We see the conventional portal players, which it's usually, hey, it's something about the fit, it's something about the scheme, or playing time, or a combination of the three, right? That's kind of the conventional transfer portal argument. I was a backup, I'm going to go be a starter somewhere else. But now, as the last year has taught us, Brandon, the reasons for portaling are endless, right? NIL, just change of scenery, home, disciplinary reasons, lack of scholarships. There's so many different reasons to potentially hit the portal, to where it's not just those reserves or newcomers that are homesick. It is totally upside down, and the Jordan Addisons of the world are making changes after winning, All America and Blitnikoff awards. So it's totally wide open this time of year, to the point where it's just beyond the conventional. So it's the 10 to 15 players make sense from the conventional standpoint, but then there's all these wild cards that are on top of that can create so much more portal impact, right? What if Anthony Richardson heads off to the NFL or surprises even more and hits the portal himself, right? Then all of a sudden, quarterback targets in the portal are that much more important for the Gators. So that's not something we're talking about. We're more focused on the conventional, but the other end of that spectrum is certainly possible over the next, a couple weeks, it feels like.
This bonus episode is brought to you by Upside because inflation sucks. Whether you're cringing at the pump, getting an eye popping check at your favorite restaurant, which I ordered from the other day, way more expensive than usual. I hate it. Inflation hit where it hurts, right in the wallet. It really hurts. That's why I started using Upside because it's an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, dines out, which I do a lot. And every purchase you earn cash back thanks to Upside. To get started, download the free Upside app, use our promo code LOCKED, and get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code LOCKED. This week's thrilling moment in college football is brought to you by Nissan. The thrilling designs behind the new lineup from Nissan are intended to empower drivers and vehicles as capable as the driver themselves. And when we're talking unbelievable abilities, when we're talking thrilling moments, I think you have to pick, at least from the Florida game this week, Trevor Etienne, 85 yards to the crib. I don't know how you can pick anything else, really. That was just incredible. I loved it. That was like the moment where I was like, oh, this is going to be a blowout. Like Trevor Etienne's big run was it. This segment has been inspired by the thrilling new designs featured across Nissan's new lineup of vehicles. Pursue what thrills you in the all-new Frontier, Armada, or Pathfinder today. Available now at nissanusa.com. Yeah, and one of the things that you mentioned is something that I brought up. I think it was last week on an episode where you mentioned scholarships, and that's another thing where Florida's got a massive recruiting class right now. I mean, you're at
Yep.
22, you're in play for a lot of other kids later in the game. I feel like
Correct.
you're probably going to add in someone who you're like, hey, like they should be playing in the SEC, like a 3-star that people are not anticipating. I feel like you might have a big recruiting class if you're Florida. You might have 25, 28 kids, as well as bringing in a couple portal kids. And it's like, well, the 25 scholarship limit for the year isn't here right now, but you still can only bring in 85 scholarship kids per year. So
Correct.
it's a good thing. You're clearing up scholarships for a group where you're very happy with the recruiting class and you're going to have a big one at that. So replacing them. But I feel like every year now it's going to be a thing with the portal. We were talking about this a little bit off air where last year it was, oh, this portal season is going to be insane. This year, oh, this portal season is going to be insane. Every year we're saying it's pretty insane. This kid is going to hit the portal. How is it that teams kind of manage the portal and expectations for who they might lose? Because Billy Napier mentioned it on, I think it was Monday's press conference. He was like, we have multiple books and documents of how we manage everything and how we think of things on our end and who we think might be on the way out. How the hell do teams even operate right now?
It's still tough, even with 100 staffers or whatever the number is at Florida and Alabama and Georgia and these other schools. It's still very hard because there's so much turnover in a normal on a normal team in a normal year. Take Alabama, who we just mentioned, pretty stable. You don't expect craziness. You do have some early entrants to the NFL draft and some pissed off young players that aren't seeing the field. So you get very much conventional with Bama, but even they will still dip into the portal. So imagine being on the flip side of that, a new coaching staff, a young coaching staff, a year or two into your tenure, how much more turnover do you expect? I was looking at Tennessee earlier, which is probably a good barometer for a lot of young coaching staffs, right? Year one showed some promise on the field. Boom, year two explosion, college football playoff contender. Let's call them at this point. How did that roster turnover look over the last year or so? Well, you mentioned it. Probably 30 guys coming into Florida this year. Well, the first full cycle for Josh Heupel, which wrapped up in the class of 2022, 22 recruits, 8 transfers coming in via the portal. So 30 new players on a roster that has an 85 scholarship limit. So just think about that. More than a third of your roster will be new players in that type of scenario. So why would we expect so much variance with Florida. We should expect something similar. The class, as you mentioned, already at 22 recruits, and there's a few more in play. And there's going to be some portal targets and additions going forward beyond spot recruiting in the portal like we saw last year under Billy Napier and company with some of those Louisiana guys coming over. So I do think that's a good school to look at for some precedent here. So 30 is kind of the number in my brain for these coaching staffs, for Florida, for Miami, for Notre Dame, USC, any of these new coaching staffs that are trying to put a full class together for the first time in terms of a full year staff. You're going to see a ton of turnover, and you don't have to look very far to find precedent in that direction. So how do you manage it? I don't know. I don't have the answer there, but I think you start managing it with chaos in mind. You manage it thinking, hey, there's going to be more turnover than we even anticipate because it's really hard to gauge some of those players that you inherited. How are they feeling, right? And again, it's I can't emphasize it enough. It's not just about the kids that want to play more. There's so many additional layers that could potentially thrust a kid towards the transfer portal that it's hard to quantify. So imagine doing that on your own roster with a bunch of guys that you still, how good a relationship can you have, however many months in. We're still less than a year in to the Napier era there at Florida. So how could you have a great relationship and a transparent relationship with players that you inherited that didn't initially, pick your program? So I think because of that, you should expect a ton of turnover. And if I was building a roster in this day and age with a new staff, I would just expect a high number, period. And I think 30 would almost be the starting point in that conversation. So if we're talking about it, I'm sure it's much more broken down up in Gainesville.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I want to know if there's going to be a Jordan Addison level transfer. I don't know if there will be because that's an insane thing, but I'm rooting for chaos. We spoke about this before we recorded. I want chaos. Like I'm here for it. I hope Florida prevails from it, but I'm an agent of chaos. I'm cool for it. I want it here. Just bring it on. Thank you so much, John. This is John Garcia, Sports Illustrated's Director of Football Recruiting, Locked On's Recruiting Insider. Catch him all throughout the Locked On College channel and on Locked On Gators whenever we can get him,
Sounds good, Brandon. Thanks for having me.